Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review, and it's Women's History Month, and I'm here today to talk to you about Echo, the miniseries. And yes, I know it's not Women's History Month, but that's about 2 months away, and so since this just dropped, I wanted to talk about it, and so it's my channel. Anyway, so Echo has finally been released. And it's a show that many people have asked themselves, what is the point in even making this show? A character that's barely been featured in the MCU, a character who is a villain getting her own show, just like Agatha. And like, how is this gonna fit in the MCU as a whole? See, the thing is that the MCU has programmed our minds for over a decade into thinking everything they put out has to lead to something bigger in the MCU because it basically did. And so with the Disney Plus projects, at first, it started to be that, with WandaVision led into Doctor Strange 2. But then after a while, everything started to kind of fizzle and they started just to be their own thing. But then once again, they started to incorporate back into the MCU, like with Miss Marvel and the Marvels. And Hawkeye and now Kate Bishop is about to join the Young Avengers. So that leaves the question of what exactly is the point of making the Echo show? And so many people, even myself, have questioned that and stuff because she's technically a villain and she's barely been in the MCU. And she was kind of even barely in the Hawkeye show where she was introduced. So back when this came out in 2021, there was a different CEO of Disney at that time. He left, somebody else came in, and when this new person came in, they're kind of like, well, crap, dude, what the heck are we going to do with this show now? Because they're making this show. And so this show is very complicated because of the simple fact that, they made it and no fan of the MCU really wanted this show. It was nothing against the cast or anything like that or the lead actress. It's just they never saw the point. But they was making this show and they still had to put it out. And so it was originally gonna drop weekly and everything. But then they decided, okay, out of the blue, let's just drop every episode on the same day. This led people to speculate that this is a show they have no interest in because when the new CEO came in and stuff like that, and Kevin Feige finally started to become Kevin Feige again, they realized, well, nobody's going to watch this show. Let's just dump it all in one day and hope for the best and everything, right? And so it just made it seem like they just didn't care about the show at all. And they're just trying to burn it off into where it became a mini series, a one and done type thing. Then all of a sudden, they showed the trailer, and not only did they show the trailer, but Kevin Feige created something called Marvel Spotlight. And Marvel Spotlight, you can have all these individual stories of heroes and villains, and it won't connect to the bigger MCU. They will probably feature again in the MCU, but it won't lead into nothing even bigger. So it's like, oh, okay, that'll make sense. Then it's kind of like the Netflix shows, right? But then all of a sudden they introduced Daredevil and the Kingpin in this show. Now the Kingpin we kind of already figured was going to be in this show. But actually we really didn't because there was no information really on this show. And so it left people to speculate what the heck is this show even going to be about. So then all of a sudden it was revealed that Daredevil and Kingpin was in it to get people interested in watching this show. And then one thing I've noticed in the past couple of months leading up to this show, or at least the past month, is that it's supposed to be an Echo show. But yet in the past month and a half, all you ever saw when promoting this show was Daredevil and Kingpin. Featurettes about Daredevil and Kingpin. And it's just kind of like, I see what you're doing here. You think nobody's gonna watch this show and it's gonna be another Miss Marvel or another like She-Hulk. So you're trying to worm people in with the whole Kingpin and Daredevil thing like you did with She-Hulk. Because what happened with She-Hulk? Everybody kept watching until Daredevil showed up halfway into the series. And when he showed up, it divided the fan base. Kingpin has already divided the fan base in the MCU. And it's quite a shame that they would do this marketing ploy because it's supposed to revolve around Echo, Maya Lopez, Aqua Cox, like character, but yet they keep promoting it as like Daredevil and Kingpin showing up. And Daredevil only shows up for like 15, 20 seconds in the first episode, and that's it. And Kingpin is shown throughout. And so, I feel so bad for Aqua Cox. Because it's like, first of all, she is gorgeous and everything. But I feel so bad for her because it's kind of like, okay, she's having this show and nobody cares about this show. They're promoting it with two guys, and that's what all the main focus is about. And like Marvel literally kept focusing on Daredevil and Kingpin leading up to this show. And this is a one and done type thing that they tried to burn off as quickly as possible. And who knows if Echo is ever going to show up in the MCU again. And so I just kind of feel so bad for her. And you just know, because this is female led and there's tons of Native American people in there. All these toxic little white dudes on YouTube are going to go crazy in the head with woke this and woke that. And it's just going to be so annoying because if this show flops, or if it's not that good, they're going to complain about it. Or if it's something they just don't like in general, they're going to complain about it. And, it's quite a shame because this is really hurting the MCU like it hurt She-Hulk. But She-Hulk wasn't all that great anyway. And just like it hurt Miss Marvel, which wasn't all that great anyway. And, and so you know how they rip those shows apart. And you know what's really interesting? If you was to ask one of them, well, what? Okay. So it's like, okay, every time something of diversity bombs or whatever, they complain, right? But if you would ever ask them, well, what happens when a predominantly white show bombs or movie flops? What then? They don't have an answer for that. They literally have no answer for that. They only have an answer when something diverse like bombs or flops or whatever. But anyway, so when it comes to this show, how do I feel about it? Well, I am a bit conflicted. When I'm watching this show, I've noticed one huge thing. It doesn't feel like an MCU Disney Plus show, which is a great thing because they're not that great. But at that same time, it feels more like a Netflix Marvel show, like from like start to finish. It feels like that. But when you watch, it feels about 90% a Netflix Marvel show, but then it also feels about 10% an MCU Disney Plus show mixed in there. And so that's like a really unique vibe and everything. And we're watching this. One thing about the Netflix Marvel shows that people always say they do good in the first season, but then they kind of fall in like the second. When it comes to the MCU shows, people say, they're a bit fragmented and some weird pacing going on. And that's how this show feels. There's a weird pacing issue with this. And not only that, but it's like, because here's the thing. Because nobody knew what this show was going to be about, I assumed that it was going to be Echo and Kingpin. After she shot him, she'll tie him up. And then they'll be going back and forth about how, he ruined her life and killed her father and this and that. And we'll see flashbacks and this and that. And it wasn't like that at all. Basically, what it is she shoots him and leaves him for dead, but then he survives and it only messed his eye up. But his eye is completely fine because he put some weird technology crap in it and stuff like that. Because you got to think about it. There's no way this dude going to walk around with an eye patch on his eye. And then this is supposed to go into that of the Daredevil series. And there's no way he's going to be walking around with no eye. So his eye is basically healed and somehow he survived death. I don't understand why they keep making this dude immortal in the MCU. But like, one crazy thing is the ending. The ending is kind of like, okay, this is what's so confusing now. Originally, the Netflix shows were never canon to the MCU. Now they have been added to the MCU timeline, making them canon. And so the ending is very confused. Either this takes place somewhere in between Daredevil season 3, or they are just gonna retcon some stuff in Daredevil season 3 and then redo that. Kinda. I'll get into that a little bit later. But back to the fragmentedness of like this series. So, because I assumed it was going to be about her and Kingpin, but it kind of wasn't. And then again, it kind of is. And so, when she goes back home and everything after shooting Kingpin, then she wants to take over like his empire and stuff, right? And be like the Queen Pin. Well, so, but here's the thing. The first two episodes has the most action in it. The first episode is basically her origin story, her being a kid, her losing her leg, her mom dying in a car crash, her grandmother getting pissed at her father, and them moving to New York. And she's separated from that of like her cousin. Oh, before I go any further, yeah, this is like unlike no other MCU Marvel show. There's blood. And there's partial nudity. So when the show first starts, it's I wasn't even sure I was watching Echo show, because there are these people with like this brown muddish kind of skin, almost like god deities or aliens or something, and they're coming out of the water, and it's very magical, very spiritual. I'm just like, what am I watching? Because I have no idea. Then these people kind of transcend onto Earth, and they go from being naked, their brown clay stuff breaks off their body, and now they have clothes, and they were the first Choctaw people. I didn't understand that, but that was really neat to see. And so I'm thinking, okay, what is this about? And then it's like, oh, okay, the two little girls are telling the story of like, how their people came to be. I'm like, okay, cool, neat, right? And then so after that, in the second episode, it starts off in the 1500s with the Native Americans playing a game, and it goes on for a long time. I'm just like, how is this supposed to connect to the show? While it's cool to see different cultures and everything, this still has to connect to that of the show. And for the most part, this doesn't even feel like a comic book show. It just feels like a show. And you'll never know it's a comic book show if you didn't see Daredevil in it. So in the first episode, after she loses her leg, loses her mom, and all this other stuff. One thing that's always been confusing, even since Hawkeye, is that how does Kingpin play a role in her life? Her father is alive and he works for the Kingpin, but the Kingpin acts like a surrogate father to her, and will even go as far as to hurt somebody if they mess with her. And it's like, okay, so she's been raised by him and brainwashed by him since a kid, and she sees him as a father figure, but yet she still loves her father even more when her father died and everything. And we still see that in the show, and it's still very confusing. But anyways, then we see her as a bit older, and her joining the Kingpin business and everything, and she seems hesitant to want to hurt somebody when she's older, which is confusing because when she was younger, she was kicking this one dude who wouldn't give her ice cream and being rude to her after Kingpin beat him to a bloody pulp. And not only that, but when she was a kid, she hurt, before her mom even died, she hurt a bird and hit it in the head just because she wanted to see it up close and everything. So she's been bad ever since she's been little and everything. So it was kind of weird that she was hesitant to join the Kingpin's army and everything. And this is, of course, when we meet Daredevil, and he's just whooping on all the bad guys and whooping on her, and then he disappears for the rest of the show. But pretty much after that, Like, she goes back home when she's an adult after she shoots Kingpin, right? Now, one of the things that's interesting is that her and her cousin, they had a very close, the female cousin, not the male one. The female cousin and her had a really close relationship, and it tore them apart when she had to move to New York. So then you assume that this show would have her cousin in it a lot, and her cousin would probably like go back and forth at it about like, and rebond and stuff like that. But no, it's not like that either. So it's like, okay, so you put all this emphasis on the female cousin, but then she's barely in the show. And then, so when she does go back home, she meets her male cousin, and he's very eccentric, very MCU. So then you think he'll be in the show throughout the entirety of the show because he's very eccentric. Nope. So then it's like, okay, well, heck, what's going on? And so then she has a grandmother who was pissed at the dad because the mom died and somebody cut the brakes to the car. And so, like, she hates the father because of that. And so they're estranged, and she's still alive in the future. And so you think, okay, well, those two are going to reconnect or like argue this and that. No, not really either. They do, but only in the 4th episode. And so it's just kind of like, well, heck, who is she supposed to interact with in the entirety of this show? Because she's not keeping Kingpin hostage. Well, she hangs around her uncle for the majority of the season. Basically, what it is she wants to bring down the Kingpin's empire and take it over. He doesn't want no part of that, even though he still kind of works for Kingpin himself. And it's later explained that he had to, because if not, he would have killed like his entire family. And so, like, basically, the first 2 episodes is her interacting with the Kingpin's people and stuff. And the second one, she's on like a train and all this and that. But then by the 3rd episode, her uncle employee noticed that she's the one who shot Kingpin. So of course he calls up like, one of the Kingpin's like right hand man and everything. And her family get kidnapped. She gets kidnapped, her cousin gets kidnapped, her uncle gets kidnapped, and so it looks pretty dire as like these bad guys are coming to like confirm it and kill her, right? So then when she's in like the storage room, she somehow gets a bunch of rolling skates and creates a ping pong shooting type device that's really weird, and I still don't know how the heck she did that. It's just weird and out of nowhere, and I didn't know she was that smart because she's never displayed that level of intelligence. Like Tony Stark can just like build a reactor in a cave out of scrap. And so after that, they get a phone call and somebody called off the hit. So you know exactly who it is. It's the freaking Kingpin. So for the first 3 episodes, this is very much based on realism and stuff like that. Just like how she was and depicted in Hawkeye, right? But then you get this MCU Disney Plus scatteredness of when the show takes a different shape and form. By the 4th and the 5th episode, now magical powers are being introduced into the show. And it's like, well, hold up. This has never been shown before in the series, and especially not Hawkeye. So where is this coming from? Like, I understand when she was telling the story of how the first Choctaw people came to be, but then there's that 2nd episode. Remember when I said like those people was playing like a game and it didn't connect to the rest of the show, so I didn't understand what that meant. Well, now we're about to find out. Now it's about to connect, but it's about to connect in a weird kind of way. So in the 4th episode, it's basically just her and the Kingpin and him trying to manipulate her, right? It's because he wants her back in the organization. He even gets to the point when he gives her the hammer that he killed his father with and is all like, you can take me out and blah, blah, stuff like that. Well, of course, she doesn't do it because she is brainwashed to the point of still loving this dude, but she still hates him because he killed her father and everything. And she has so many opportunities to reshoot him again, and she's never done that. Now, all of a sudden, she starts to have these hallucinations of people she never saw. These are the people from the 2nd episode who was playing the game. At that same time, her grandmother's having these same hallucinations. She has no idea what's going on, so her uncle takes her to her grandma. Now, when her uncle takes her to her grandma, the outfit she is wearing is very reminiscent to that of her comic book costume, just altered and everything. because she's never really dressed the way she did in the comics. There's no white paint handprint on her face, even though there was a blood handprint on her face at one point to allude to it. But the outfit she's wearing is very similar to her comic. So her and her grandma just can't get along. The grandma's trying to explain herself and this and that, and she's just all pissed off, talking about you abandoned me, and when I went to New York, and she's like, no, I just hated your father. I never hated you. But her father said, oh, she hates us both. And so she's hovering over that, and she should know better. But of course, she's been lied and manipulated ever since she's been a kid, so she still thinks with that kid mentality and everything, right? And so then her grandmother explains the magical power all of a sudden. And Echo in the comics don't have a magical power. Basically what it is she's just really good at fighting, and she has like a photographic memory similar to Taskmaster. If she sees the way you fight, she can replicate it just by her photographic memory. But she has no powers. But they're going to give her some in the MCU because everybody gets a power now. And so like now we have these other like godlike deities from the Native American people introduced into MCU, all these other godlike deities. But since this show is a one and done type thing, and from Marvel Spotlight, is not going to connect to the overall bigger picture of the MCU, but we'll see what happened after that. So anyways, apparently the women in her family have the ability to heal. Like they touch something and it will heal their wounds and stuff like that, right? And it's been passed on from generation to generation. And so it's in her as well. And it's in the grandmother, it's in the mom and stuff like that, right? So she gets pissed off and she walks off and all this other stuff, right? Well, Kingpin ain't gonna take no for an answer because he wants her to go back to New York with him, but she don't want to. So during a big powwow in the 5th episode, he kidnaps her entire family. And when she rushes back home, she sees her dead mother, like the spirit, and her mother is talking to her and this and that. And within a few couple of seconds, I guess her mom teaches her how to use the powers because she's never known how to use these powers before. But of course, she's gonna be an expert in them in the last episode. And so we get some interaction with her cousin, the female one, but not as much as you would think because they put so much emphasis on that on the 1st episode, but it didn't really pan out to nothing. Anyways, you get to the 5th episode, and of course, Kingpin's pissed. He got all his men surrounded. Her people are being kidnapped. And so her grandmother made her a costume, a Native American costume that's also reminiscent to that of her comic book costume. Basically, it's kind of like, it's very much inspired by Native American. It's kind of like Shang-Chi's outfit. It's an MCU superhero costume, but with like Chinese heritage into it. Personally, I can't see her wear this in the MCU. It just doesn't look like a superhero costume, but I am glad it looks different from like all the other MCU costumes. But I just can't see her wearing this and stuff. But it is nice to look at. So anyway, she's there, and all of a sudden she taps into all of her ancestors, her female ancestors, none the male, by the way. And so it's kind of like an Avatar Last Airbender thing. All of a sudden, somehow she's able to pass this power on to her female cousin and her grandmother, none of the males, by the way. And now all of a sudden we get this big battle with the grandmother, the cousin, and Echo as they're beating up the Kingpin's men using their glowing fist hand. And it's like, wait, hold up, why are the fists glowing if their power is supposed to heal? It's not like Iron Fist, but they're treating it like the Iron Fist glowy hand. And so now I'm all like, Lord Jesus have mercy. I don't want to see a Blue Beetle family like battle and everything. This is Echo's show. She is the hero. I want to see her take down all the people. Not see an old lady and a cousin who don't know how to fight take down a bunch of grown men. Not only that, but none of them know how to use this power, but now they know how to use it like they're experts. And then it happens once again. And I do mean once again. Kingpin gets taken out by a woman who's half his size. First is Kate Bishop, and now it's Maya slash Echo. And she didn't even have to punch him. All she did was use her power to stop him, Avatar Last Airbender style. Remember Ozai and Aang fought? It's kind of like that. She puts her fingers on his forehead, and all of a sudden she like heals the pain that he's experienced all his life mentally and everything. So he's having flashbacks of him killing his father and this and that, and she's trying to heal his soul. Does it work? We don't know, because he's left like fragmented and like talking about, what did you do to me? What did you do to me? And he's just like out of it and everything. I'm like, what the heck did she do to him? Not only that, but this is the second woman to take him down in a fight, and they're half his size. In season 1 of Daredevil was able to take him down, but it was the fight of Daredevil's life, because it took a long time for him to take down the Kingpin, because the man is so big. And he had to use his billy club to smack him around a good couple of times, use his agility to bounce around so Kingpin couldn't grab him, just to get the upper hand on him. Then in season 3, they had to use the combined strength of 2 grown men to take down Kingpin. And one of those grown men kept getting his butt kicked constantly, because Daredevil had to fight both of them off. And then the only way Daredevil was able to defeat Kingpin, because Kingpin was distracted by looking at his wife. That is the only way Daredevil took him down. Yet in the MCU, women who are half his size is able to whoop his behind. I don't get why they keep doing this to Kingpin. So anyways, she says like goodbye to her people. They're all good now. They're all reconnected. And then we get a weird ending scene with Kingpin that confuses the crap out of me. He leaves and he's on a plane and he's watching, like, the news, and it's talking about the New York mayor race. And they talking about how, like, the people want somebody who's different, this and that. So in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, he's going to run for mayor again. Didn't he do that in season 3 of Daredevil? So this makes me think, when he got out of prison in Daredevil season 3, the events of Echo either must have happened and then he ran for mayor, or they're just gonna retcon season 3 and do whatever they want in Daredevil Reborn. And I'm just really confused by this. Now, when it comes to Daredevil himself, how was he? He was fine, but he's a combination of his Netflix and his MCU counterpart. Basically, they just combine both personalities. They have the suit from the Netflix show, but he has all of the agility and uses his billy club like a whip, the same way he does in like the MCU. Plus, when he's fighting, he's shooting off quips and jokes and everything, similar to what he did in the MCU. So he's like a combination of both. So we have to wait to his show to see how exactly he's going to be 100%. As for Kingpin himself, this Kingpin acted very much like the Netflix one until the very end, when he became the MCU version again. So one cool thing about this show is that it did depict Native American people in a very positive light. Like, it was nice to see like their culture, their music, their clothes, and it was great to see actual Native American people in a show where it's not a bunch of white people with like tans, or like, Italian people or like Hispanic people pretending to be Native American. Because that's one thing about Hollywood that always gets on my nerves, is that they always cast white or Hispanic people to play like Native Americans and stuff. And the show did have an actual nice blend of both Native American culture while trying to tell this, like, I I can't really call it a comic book superhero story because it doesn't really feel like that, but like a story and everything. So it finally had a nice blend of both like genres and stuff. Like you had the cultural stuff and then you had the stuff that's going on with Echo and the whole Kingpin thing, and it was blended in very nicely. Something Hollywood has a trouble of like doing because normally they go one way and not like the other. However, I do wonder how Native American people feel when they see these American white produced like projects. And normally when there is like a story being told about Native Americans, it's always something magical or like spiritual and stuff. I remember there was a show back in the 90s, a Canadian show called Two, where a man didn't know he had a twin, and so his twin framed him for murder, and he's just scouring all around Canada, and he came on like, you know, indigenous like settlement at one point, and there was like this magical stuff going on, but yet the show isn't magical itself. So I do wonder like how Native American people and indigenous people feel normally when they see their people portrayed like in television and movies, and sometimes there's always like this magical spiritual type stuff when the rest of the episode or movie doesn't have any of that. All in all, I think Echo is just like an average mid show. It's not like the greatest show ever, but it's not terrible either. Like it will keep you engaged and everything, and it will, you know, entertain you, but it's not like the best superhero type show ever because it just basically just feels like a regular show. But then it also is a very confusing show because you expect for her to interact with like her family members because, you know, she hasn't saw them in a long time and they put so much emphasis on them in the first episode, but that really doesn't happen in the show. Like, okay, her grandfather and her grandmother was married back when, you know, her mom was alive. All these years later, 20 years later, the grandfather and the grandmother are broken up. Why? It's never explained why. But then when they see each other again, they're looking at each other like they want to jump each other bones. And so it's like, well, what the heck happened between those two? Well, we will never know because the show doesn't want to go into it. And her female cousin, they barely interact. Her and her male cousin barely interact. And not only that, but once again, it's that weird pacing of the MCU Disney Plus shows where the first couple of episodes about one thing and then the last two about something completely different. You go from realism in the first 3 episodes, but then all of a sudden in the last 2, then you get all this magical spirit like superpower type stuff, and it doesn't mesh well. Like 5 episodes is not enough to tell these episodes, and not only that, but the times are different. The first episode is 50 something minutes. The second and third is about 40. And then the last 2 are 30 minutes and stuff. So once again, Disney Plus just doesn't know what it's doing when making the show, which explains why all their shows get canceled after 1 or 2 seasons and stuff. So once again, it's not a terrible show. And it's also not a great show. It's good. It's all right. Like, that's just it. It's all right, man. People mostly probably just expected it to be all right. When they put out that one trailer, they made people think this is going to be a very dark and very gritty show. I will admit, it does things completely different than the MCU, and it's willing to go slightly there. Like, people getting shot, people blood splattering everywhere, slight nudity and stuff like that. But all in all, it is basically a combination of the Netflix Marvel show and the MCU Disney Plus show. Happy Women's History Month, everybody. All right, well, I'll talk to you later. Bye.